Hey guys, Bones here, and today I want to relate my experiences of going from years and years of playing League of Legends to transitioning into Dawn of War 3. Now, my points will probably work for RTSs in general, if that's what you're interested in, but, Dawn of War 3 is what I play. It's the example going on in the background. We'll be starting a Dawn of War 3 game shortly, so I can show you, in-game visual representations and whatnot. But, yeah, Dawn of War 3 basis here. So there were a few key areas I focused on to help facilitate all this, and I feel they helped me become a relatively competent RTS player in quite a short period of time, just a few weeks. Now, I'm not some Korean Grandmaster champion at StarCraft or something, or, not going to be winning any MLG tournaments anytime soon, or, whatever the standard is. But, I'm, as I said, relatively competent. I can hold my own. I'm not a bad RTS player, in a sense. Now, so you know where I'm coming from, sort of the basis that I'm working from here. Now, since I'm an old person, I'm technically, I would have been an RTS player originally, although I've never really played an RTS, in any kind of super serious capacity, back then. Just simply because MOBAs didn't exist at the dawn of time, like they came later. So I do remember when I first played Dota, like as a Warcraft 3 custom map. I recall it being because it was a lot more mechanically simple, and it was a lot less mentally taxing. It was essentially less stressful, I suppose. Why it was a thing for me, probably for basically everyone else who played it. Now, when I wanted to play the real, super serious, very competitive sort of thing, I would play my real game of Warcraft 3 online or whatnot, but against other people. But then I would fire up a game of Dota or, Infantry, whatever the hell it was called. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. Or, some tower defense map or, Duke Winter Mall tower defense, something like that. So, you have to understand that MOBAs, while amusing in their own right and they do things well as a genre themselves, it doesn't need to be understood that they're essentially RTS lights in terms of their feature sets. And there's just so much more you have to do in an RTS. So MOBAs by design are they very much hyper-focus your attention into a single or very few areas. And you're supposed to do those well, theoretically. You can suck at them and be carried by your teammates, but that's another topic entirely. The idea is, you got to focus pretty much mainly on your character, whereas RTS spreads your attention, very thinly over a wide variety of tasks. So, MOBA experience is nice and everything, but it doesn't prepare you for everything. You gotta kind of understand that. For example, day one of Dawn of War 3, I remember, right off the bat, my skill shots were pretty good. I would say they're better than most people, and they're probably still better than most people. But my army control was utter garbage. Just things spread out all over the map. I lose track of things, and I'm still not, by comparison, as good at it because I don't have years and years of MOBA experience. So, it's better to have MOBA experience than not having it, but it's not going to, immediately, make you the best RTS player ever. But the key is to not get overwhelmed and try and take on every single minuscule facet and feature of an RTS in Dawn of War 3 all at once. Don't get bogged down by, more advanced macro strategies and blah, blah, blah. It's like by X minute, I have to have the unit composition of exactly this. And always take this hero because it's always the best. And, if this person builds this, the counter unit is going to be this. Always have it, Again, just don't get bogged down in that sort of stuff. Hone your attention onto a few key differences, and the rest should eventually start to click. So don't take on too much at once. Realize what's important and what's sort of the basis you should be working from. Now, that the most obvious difference is, well, obviously, it's going to be the sheer number of units on screen. And the way you control those units is hotkey groups. So now, Defense of the Ancients and Heroes of the Storm do have units that utilize hotkey groups to an extent, but we're going to ignore that because I'm assuming most of you guys, like me, have a more League of Legends kind of basis to things. So yeah, get used to hotkey groups. Just keep them simple at first. Just 2 or 3. Don't overwhelm yourself with hotkey groups 1 through 5 because it's going to be too confusing and you won't end up using any of them. So at first, just keep things simple, like melee and ranged. So I'm going to show you guys that in game right now. Alright, so by hotkey groups, let's see what I mean here. So this is a whole mess of units. You don't want to be dealing with this. You might be tempted to just highlight them all and go, hey, attack. But that's probably not a good idea. It'll get you through, you know, some pretty simple games, but if you run into anyone who knows what they're doing, you're just going to die. Look, we even have, like, builder units mixed in there. So what you want to do is, like I said, you know, eventually you probably do want to work to the point where you have a whole bunch of hotkey groups. But, you know, if you can't manage that many, it's pointless to do it. So you probably just want to start out by doing something like all range units, group 1. And here's something that's pretty incorrect, but it's a decent place to... Oh, they want to fight me. It's a decent place to start from. So let's see now. You get all our range units here. And notice I have different types of range units all mixed together. So typically you're probably... This is a bit specific and I shouldn't be talking about it, but... You know, usually you probably don't want to have stationary range units with setup time range units, but for the sake of simplicity, if it's all I can manage right now, get all the range units together. It's better to have them used in a hotkey group than having them not be used at all because you lost track of them because they're over there or something. So, you know, eventually, you know, you could probably work to the point where you're like, or even relatively early on, have these be just control 2, and then the setup Ludas or, you know, unit 3 or something like that. So, you know, 3 is reasonable. Maybe you can manage it. But, you just make sure you do have a hotkey, you know, some hotkey groups. Otherwise, the game will just turn into a complete clusterfuck over time, and you will lose track of things. It's sort of a snowball effect where, you know, you lose track of one aspect of the game, which is sort of your units and what they're doing, and then, you know, you're worrying about that more than you have to, and then you lose track of your economy, blah, blah, blah. So just make sure that doesn't get started. You know, never get overwhelmed by a bunch of things. Now, having tons of units spread out all over the map, as opposed to, you know, 100% it on your screen, you know, like a MOBA, will be confusing for a while, but you'll eventually get it, so just keep practicing at it. And don't worry too much if a huge chunk of your army gets wiped out off-screen. Like, I mean, I'd worry about it from, you know, the perspective of that game specifically. You know, you might lose it or something. But again, it's a matter of just practicing that sort of stuff. So, yeah, eventually you will get used to having your attention split between, you know, various things all over the map. For example, I'm going to send my melee units that way, but, you know, for whatever reason, I want to keep my range units over here, kind of thing. So, you know, you're focused on this fight over here, and let's say there's a second fight over there, kind of thing. So, it's just a matter of practice. Why am I being attacked so much? Let's just wipe these guys out here. Actually, we don't need to look at this. Let's move on to our second point, which is the economy. Alright, so the second point is managing the economy, and basically the fact that you have to not neglect it. There isn't an exact direct analog between Dawn of War 3 and RTSs and League of Legends and stuff like that. Probably, you know, you could make some sort of comparison with maybe CSing and gold and something, but not really. But anyway, the point is, you can be, you know, the master of unit micro and have the best tactics in the world and have the most clever flanking maneuver that, you know, wins you every single engagement. But if your economy is rubbish, there's a good chance you just end up losing in the long run anyway. You know, you win every single fight up until suddenly where it's a point where you're working with such a money deficit that the guy just kind of like pushes through you and you end up losing. So yeah, keep capturing strategic points and you know, upgrading them with the resource generator things wherever possible. Though you'll have to assess that on a case-by-case basis, you know, when to do that, where to do that. It's all based on the context of the game specifically. I wouldn't worry about that too much. That's a bit complicated, like the specifics of when to do it. Just the main point is be cognizant of it. You know, just remember that your economy is something that needs to be upgraded, be mindful of it, and then eventually, the more you do it, you eventually get a feel for it. Like, if you're really interested in the game, there's probably guides and whatnot to tell you when you want to be upgrading stuff, but, again, that's a little bit advanced. You know, so, you know, in terms of... Now, I guess one thing you should be mindful of is you probably don't want to be going overboard with it. You know, don't spend everything on resource upgrades. These are these things here, you know, you've captured points. So, and I can press all these. So don't completely bankrupt yourself and have no units on the field. But you know that's one end of the extreme. You'll probably get a balance eventually. Like the best I can say about this is get a feel for it and don't neglect it. All right, so the third point is kind of an extension of the second point, and the whole economy thing. But basically, it's how you need to not neglect upgrades. Much like the economy thing, remember to get them when you need them, but don't completely overdo it and like bankrupt yourself, and you know end up getting wiped on the field because you have no units on the field. Because that's one extreme of the thing. Much like economy, I say it's kind of a feel thing. As you get used to RTSs and sort of, well, Dawn of War 3 here, it's the kind of thing you'll have a better understanding for, like when you need it and what you need at any given time. But a good starting point is going to be just do it from feel. While you're doing it, you'll help it'll help you understand the game better. But let's say you have a whole bunch of infantry, and you're like, I feel like my infantry's getting blown up too quickly. So I have the resources for it. I haven't forgotten to upgrade stuff. It's in my mind. Let's just spend it on something. It's better than not upgrading anything. So we're gonna get infantry health upgrade 2 here, stuff like that. So yeah, and that's kind of difficult to do. I realize, when you got this big battle going on. Let's get all my army here, for example, and let's say I'm making a big attack here. Much like with economy, it's hard to keep track of it. Well, let's say we've managed to do our hotkey group thing. Although I'm globbing right now for the sake of this video. But, I'm keeping track of unit composition. I have my hotkey groups. I'm managing economy. In the meantime, I was like, oh yeah, I need more power, so let's upgrade that thing right there. I'm falling behind. So while you're doing all that, here's another level of thing, you need to actually focus on. You might think it's kind of a simple thing, but, in the midst of things, you do need to be doing, basically the player who's doing more at once is the guy who's going to end up doing better. So, even in the middle of battle, just remember, oh, yeah, I've got the resources for it. Soon I'm going to need another upgrade. I want reinforced trucks or something like that. So, while we're fighting up here, I'm cognizant of that. And, I'm upgrading my resources. I have this thing on the way. And I'm like, well, I have a lot of resources, so I can, further queue vehicle damage. That's what I want next. And just, while we're fighting even. Have all that stuff going. I'm not saying you're going to be able to do this all these things simultaneously, but try and work at it, and eventually, hopefully, you get there. Like I'm not even there totally. Like I forget, one thing or another in the midst of battle, very often. But yeah, resource upgrades. All right. So the fourth and final point is resource float. Resource float is when you're sitting on too much resource and it's just there doing nothing. Dawn of War and typically RTSs in general are not real life, where it's good to be sitting on a relatively, large stockpile of cash in your bank account or whatever because you're waiting for a rainy day. You need to spend like you're very, very financially irresponsible person. So get used to spending it whenever you can, as much as you can. Don't worry too much about what you're spending it on really early on. I'm not saying you can spend it on whatever, it doesn't matter, but at least get used to the concept of using your resources. That's the important part here. And eventually, like these other concepts I was talking about, you get a feel for what works and what doesn't. You'll be able to hone your craft a bit more. But yeah, just get used to spending it. It's tougher than it sounds, when there's all those things going on in game simultaneously, like I was talking about earlier. You're managing your hotkeys, you're managing your upgrades, you're managing your resources, then spending those resources on top of that. It can get difficult. Just name a few of the things you'll be actually doing in game. Now remember, it doesn't matter how strong your economy is if you're not actively using your resources. See, I'm sitting on 1 trillion resources here because this is an example game. These resources, it doesn't matter that I control the whole map. It is completely worthless that I'm sitting on 15,000 requisition and over 2,000 power. So, we're going to get to the point where I'm like, oh crap, I got to use it. So let's spend it on, well, I'm going to get a truck from this building. I'm going to get a knobs from here. Let's get a couple more upgrades. Since I have so much, I'm going to queue basically everything I can possibly build. Gretchen, build me, I don't know, a vehicle thing. We can even spend a few more on boys here. You're almost done getting these guys, so give me a truck. Oh, actually, I already got a truck, so let's cancel that. We're going to get some more tank busters. And so there we go. Now, like, you know, I'm still sitting on 1 billion resources, but I'm actually starting to spend them a bit. So yeah, that's the concept there. Do not sit on resource float, because resource that is not doing anything is worthless. I don't want to talk about upkeep stuff. That's a separate issue there. Just spend your resources. Alright, so to briefly recap all the points we've talked about here, I realize I said earlier on that there are more differences between MOBAs and RTSs, you know, obviously, but we have to start somewhere. So I feel these 4 main points are a good place to start with, so as to not get overwhelmed by the sheer amount of stuff you have to do. It's essentially the task of managing as many of these base systems as possible and preventing them from all sort of stacking up and getting too chaotic, and you maintain a control over the game. So you always understand what's going on, or as much of the game as possible. And with practice, again, you start recognizing or being able to more efficiently use your hotkey groups, and you keep up to task on that. You know, you manage to actually upgrade your economy while you're doing this and you're fighting, and while you're managing your economy and you're fighting, you're also upgrading your units, and while you're upgrading your units, you're spending everything somewhat efficiently, and not sitting on a ton of resource float. So those are sort of the 4 main areas. There is more you have to do, obviously, but once you can start getting those sort of basics down in the game, if you can start to move on and master some more things, and you're well on your way to doing quite well with Dawn of War 3 and RTSs. I suppose Dawn of War 3 here specifically. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'm off to actually probably go play Dawn of War 3 now, if you happen to catch this video right as I'm uploading it on twitch.tv/bots. Usual live streaming haunt. There is a new patch introducing Annihilation mode, I believe, today, so that should be interesting to check out. Anyway, yeah, I'm off. Thanks for watching again. Goodbye.